Hi, I'm Margaret with Clay Creations, and today's class is going to be on trimming. So I have this vase for you to see. One thing that I like to talk about first is I look at the form and I think about what shape I want my foot to be. Obviously, when something is really wide and not so tall, you might have a smaller foot, or something small and narrow, you might have a foot that's the width is even more narrow. For me, on this vase, I'm going to bring the foot in quite a bit, but I want to leave a little, I want to have an exaggerated larger foot, just because I think that it will balance out with the top of the vase for aesthetic purposes, the way I think that it will look good. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use the rings on my wheel head to try to get it centered. I'm going to go very slow. Adjust it. What I'm doing is, as the wheel's spinning, I'm touching the edge, and when I feel that it comes away from my finger, then I know I need to adjust it. Just a little bit. Okay, that's good enough. So, the more narrow and tall the pieces, the bigger pieces of clay that you want to use to hold it in place, so it doesn't fall over as easily. When you're working on something short and wide, small pieces are fine, but with this height, I'm going to use some bigger pieces of clay. And as I put my pieces of clay down against the wheel head, holding in my vase here, I'm also careful that I'm not pushing into the rim of the vase and cracking it, because sometimes you won't see the crack until after it comes out of the kiln. Okay, so when you are first learning how to center, the very first thing that I teach is making two lines like this. I brace my elbows, I use this square loopy tool, and I make my two lines, and this part stays up, this comes down, and this comes down. The reason I like to teach that way is so that you get a visual on what you're supposed to do. This part comes off, this goes down. As you become more proficient, I have found that moving the clay in until you feel like that is where you want your outside line to be is a better way to go. Because sometimes you just say, oh yeah, it feels right, that's it. And actually it's pretty close anyway to what I had just originally estimated with my two lines. But quite honestly, as you kind of get the basics down with putting your two lines in and seeing where the foot is, afterwards I would suggest that you just don't put your two lines in and do what I just did by moving up all the way to the outside edge until it feels like that's where you want it to be. And then you'll turn around and put your inside line in. Okay, because this is so tall, I'm holding it just as a little extra precaution when I'm taking a lot of clay off. Normally, if I was trimming something else that's shorter, I might just hold it like this the whole time. Let me take this off. But just because I'm putting a little bit extra pressure, pushing harder to take more clay off, I'm going to hold on to it. Now, because I want a bigger foot, I'm going to kind of stop there. Notice how I always connect my hands. I brace my elbows on my knees or I connect my hands so they're always touching, because if they're separate like this, you don't have as much stability, you'll move around. So I either connect it this way or hold it this way, always keeping my knees down. My elbows on my knees. I have my thumb against it. So when I'm taking a lot of clay off, I like to use this loopy tool. There's less pressure and it's easy to move a lot of clay. Later I'll use the bigger tool as a way of taking the lines out, smoothing it out, taking less clay. Alright, for right now I'm going to leave that alone and move towards the bottom. Alright, so I'm going to speed up a little bit and move back and forth. You can start from the center and move out, or move from the outside and move in, whatever you're comfortable with, or both. I do a little bit of both. If you have a lot of spirals, that means you're moving too quick. So you want to move a little slower then. You see rings, but you don't want to see spirals. Okay, now what I'm going to do is with my round side, I'm going to push in this corner, and square side at an angle, making this kind of a bevel. So it'll meet on the other side. So it's a continuation of this circle here. It's like that. The foot is right there. It's always thicker in that corner, so I don't have to worry about that. It's going to get too thin there. So a little bevel. Alright, now here, just going to angle this a little bit. Kind of lightens it up too, cleans it up. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my outside edge. I'm looking here, and I think I want this to be, a lot of times I'll use this tool as my gauge, but I think I want it to be a little lower than this width. So I'm going to use the round loopy side, make my indentation, square side up at an angle, and I push in and down. I'm going to take this extra off here. I'll go up and down. People ask me sometimes, well, how do you know how much to take off? And I always say, well, you kind of learn over time with your own work how thick or thin things are. And what I do first is I feel it, and then when I finish, I feel it. So I get a sense, did I take off too much, too little? Over time you start to learn your own muscle memory and how much you take off, how much more you can take off, or if you end up taking too much off. You say, oh, I could feel that, tapping it. You kind of start to educate yourself on what it feels like once it starts getting thin. Like now. And I still got a little bit more. This one I left some ridges in, so I'm just going to kind of even it out so it matches. Take these ridges out now. Maybe I leave some smaller ones in. I think I'll leave these in. Just smooth out this part. A little bit of diversity. Okay, now I'm going to look at this foot again. I want it to be angled like this. Why? Because when the glaze comes down my piece, I want it to be able to catch and hold somewhere, so it doesn't just, if it's a runny glaze, slide and stick to the shelf. So I like this angle here. Make sure I get that angle the way I want it to look. And then I like to have just an angle here, because this is where there's not going to be any glaze. Okay, I'll round it so my foot is a little bit softer. I even like this little. There we go. Okay, I'll turn it over. And there we go. There's my foot. Okay, if it were smaller, I would, and wider, I'd put my hand in like this, feel the edge. I still can. See if I could have taken more off, or if I went really close, maybe I took too much off. It feels good. And there you go, finished. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today.